We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us try to be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, heading the clouds and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days. Everybody is slave.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is Top Lobster, and we are here today with Jake, the American Shaman. What's going on, brother? How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Before we get into it, do you want to tell the audience where they can find you and a little bit about what you do?
Sure. They can find me on X or Twitter at America Shaman. That's America Shaman, at America Shaman on Twitter. They can also go to my website, ForbiddenTruthAcademy.com. That is ForbiddenTruthAcademy.com. Academy.com. We have all sorts of free courses, all sorts of free content, free podcasts for people to listen to. Nearly all of my interviews are up there. If you guys want to do that, you can check that out. There's also some awesome merch. It's actually pretty freaking funny, pretty cool. Oh, is that my lag? What's going on there?
Yeah, we're having some sort of a audio feedback, and so I think we're trying to cycle through some things to figure that out there.
Okay, let me try something different here. How's that? Is that better?
That's actually pretty good. Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, anyway, ForbiddenTruthAcademy.com. We've got all sorts of free content. We got some awesome merch. We got a link to my book. There's also a place that people can book me for interviews if they want to do that, or they can have me do a personal consultation with them, help them with their personal ascension process. It's my recommendation that people digest the hours and hours and hours of content that we have that's for free first before they schedule a consultation.
All right. And one more time, what is the name of that website?
ForbiddenTruthAcademy.com.
All right. And so I feel as though we would be remiss if we didn't describe a little bit about how you got here and who you are. You've talked to Top before. You've not talked to me. And so if you want to and so that means part of my audience is over here. They've never heard you before. Can you walk us through a little bit about what put you in the position that you're in? I mean, you're a shaman on top of all the things that you already do. And so I imagine that there's a long history of things that got you interested in that in the first place. But now you're doing things in a real public way. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about the set of wild circumstances that catapulted you into the public spotlight?
Well, I've been practicing shamanism for over 10 years, but I've been on the spiritual path ever since I was a small child. I wanted to know the answers to the big questions. Who is God? What is God? Where is God? Why is the world like this if God exists? Why is the world so screwed up? And I never got any good answers from the church that my mom was having us go to, from my parents, or from school. So I really kind of endeavored to figure out these things on my own. And in the process, as I went down this spiritual path, every time I found like a little nugget of gold in the river of information that was before me, it's like I was gold panning for truth. And I would take one of those little nuggets and I'd put it in my rucksack. And eventually it got to a point where I accumulated so many gold nuggets that I was able to smelt it all down and turn it into a couple of gold bars and just pop it on the table and be like, yeah, here it is. I'm more of a spiritual activist than a political one. So my presence on January 6th was more so one that was spiritual in nature. But the thing is that our socioeconomic and geopolitical systems are so corrupt because our spiritual systems, our spiritual perspective has become so corrupted and distorted. So it's my goal to help humanity to ascend. It is my goal to help humanity to become enlightened as individuals and as a collective.
Hey, Jake, with what's been going on with with Israel and Palestine, it's not very interesting to me, but for me to pick your brain about what you think about it, I'd love to know, because I think your perspective more than other people's would be enlightening, at least to where you're at mentally now.
Okay. Well, let's start with the fact that Israel funded and created Hamas to get rid of Yasser Arafat. Okay. Similar to how the United States funded, trained, and armed Al Qaeda. You know, it's covert warfare. It's the use of underground fringe groups to serve the will of larger governments. Now, it's also important to note that leaders on both sides, Palestinian and Israeli, American and Chinese, are all corrupted by the same entities that seek to use these false idols and these, shall we say, misleaders that are in government and on television and entertainment, etc., to basically corral humanity over a cliff and have us fighting one another over things that they are themselves responsible for. You know, and this is because obviously they have a depopulation agenda. War makes them money. Fear gives them power, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, see, well, you're kind of just like leading me where I want to go. That was like, I didn't ask you a leading question, but you're bringing me there, man. This show is called Nephilim Death Squad, and we blame all this shit on the Nephilim. So like, when you say they, a lot of people would say Jews. Not what I'm talking about. We're talking about a greater power, something that is eternal or has been around since before mankind. When you were saying like the depopulation agenda, what are your views on the Nephilim? What do you know about that? What do you think about it?
Well, first of all, our real history is being kept from us. That's number one. If we look into legends all over the globe, then we will see legends of giants. Okay. Now, as a shamanic practitioner and somebody that explores the unknown and the unseen, I'm telling you that the legends, not just about things like Nephilim and stuff like that, but things about like angels and demons, the spirit world, the paranormal, UAPs or UFOs, these things are real. The legends are true. The myths are true. Our ancestors were not stupid. I mean, how did they survive in the harshest environments imaginable? Because they were fucking smart, not because they were stupid. So when any individual goes out into the wild, especially on their own, they're going to find a whole different world than the one that is in the cities. And they're going to realize that the ancient cultures were living essentially technically this never stopped being the wild. We're still in the wild, but we've just become domesticated in these little pens we call cities. But when you get out beyond the fences, shall we say, beyond the pen, you realize that the world is far more mysterious, not only than we suppose, but to quote Terence McKenna, the world is not just stranger than we suppose. It's stranger than we can suppose. So when it comes down to the Nephilim, especially if we look into things like elongated skulls and the fact that the plates on the brain are actually, they're not these elongated skulls. It's not 3 plates or 3 portions of the skull. It's 2. And the front portion is actually very, very thick. So there's a lot of speculation that these Nephilim are actually like a version of humanity that was pre-deluge or pre-flood. And a lot of the ancient giants supposedly had these elongated skulls, which gave them increased brain power and this is very important, a certain level of psychic abilities that enabled them to perceive more of the electromagnetic spectrum than we perceive with our five senses. Now, the less than 1%ers, as I like to call them, I don't like to call them elites because they're far from elite. The less than 1%ers believe that they are related to these Nephilim or these quote unquote fallen angels. Now, if we go into like things like the secret space program and the information that's, been collected there, or the ancient history of our solar system, I mean, all you got to do is look at the asteroid belt that's in between Mars and Jupiter and say, well, how the hell did that thing get there? And supposedly it was because of an ancient cosmic war. At least that's what they say. And that was actually once a massive Earth-sized planet, a massive Earth-like planet that was much larger than Earth. And supposedly this is the origins of the Nephilim, and Mars and the Earth were actually like moons to this massive Earth-like planet that I believe the Sumerians call Tiamat.
Wow.
That's
What do you
something new.
think when it comes to these, we were just talking about these families, these royal bloodlines. They believe that they're descendants from the Nephilim, and by proxy of that, the descendants of the fallen. Where do you fall on that? Do you think that there's some validity to that? Because it seems like they've built their entire agenda off of that concept.
Well, if you look into the Rh negative blood type and the fact that it's one of the most rare, if not the most rare on the planet, and the fact that a lot of these royal bloodlines actually have that blood type, then that's kind of indicative that they may be onto something. However, that doesn't mean that anyone and everyone with an Rh negative blood type is bad. I think it's also important to note that part of the reason why these royal bloodlines, these less than 1%ers, do a lot of the interbreeding that they do, where they marry like their second cousin or whatever, it's not just about keeping the money and the power in the family. It's also about keeping their DNA pure, or keeping it to where the Rh negative blood type or their in their DNA is kept within a tightly knit gene pool. And the reason for this is because due to the fact that these royal bloodlines have been practicing things like ancient Babylonian black magic that actually predates the flood, by the way, they have DNA that is kind of like an antenna. I mean, all of our DNA are like antenna. If you look into the Heart Math Institute, there's these little antenna on our DNA that are responsive to frequencies within our electromagnetic field, etc. Fear is a very low, broad wave, and love is a very rapid, up and down wave, high frequency wave. And when you map these frequencies over the DNA, it activates these antenna that send and receive light and information. Now, these royal bloodlines, they have been practicing black magic for generation upon generation upon generation. What do I mean by black magic? Conjuring demonic entities from other dimensions, or what some people might consider in a more scientific view, other portions of the electromagnetic spectrum, which are layered on top of our own. We're talking about dimensions that and frequencies of electromagnetic activity that go beyond our five senses. And so these people, because they believe they're related to the Nephilim, because they believe that they're more advanced, basically, and because they've been practicing these black magic rituals for thousands of years, their DNA is adapted to perceiving these other dimensions, in particular the low frequency portion, the demonic side of the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't perceive the light side, because they can, but they choose to work with the low frequency, the demonic side. And they also, and this might sound strange to some people, but this also enables their DNA to be a better antenna for these entities if and when they choose to be possessed by them.
Wow.
No, top. I feel like we have to from now. That was so great, by the way. I feel like we have to from now on. Every guest that we have to kick the door open on their thoughts
Yeah.
on the Nephilim.
Hey, hold
I
on.
know.
I made this
Go
graphic
ahead.
and we never used it, so fuck it. Yeah.
Nephilim. There we go.
Real quick.
Nephilim shit.
Nephilim shit. I got to add a question mark to that. Like, what do you think about it? Nephilim shit. I'm so glad that I just asked you that because I don't think any other guest would have given us something like this, like an explanation or at least a ponderance of like where you just went.
Yeah, you set the bar.
You set the bar very high, and I knew you would.
Thank
That's
you.
why I was like, I don't want to talk politics. I want to talk real shit with you. You mentioned dimensions, and we have our friend Paul from U Conspiracy. He'll be on. He had a theory about after the flood, the Nephilim were kind of like banished or killed. Some of them were able to go to another dimension. I believe that's Paul, right? Like
Essentially, that their disembodied spirits are trapped in another dimension, and that's what you would attribute sort of demonic possession and hauntings and all these various paranormal experiences, the negative variety at least, are the way he put it. It's like Al Capone being in prison and still running the mob. These things are trapped wherever they're trapped. Their spirits, they're no longer in a physical form, but they still influence our realm to a great degree.
Well, but that's why they choose to coerce these families into allowing themselves to be possessed, because through their bodies and through possession, these demonic entities are able to wreak havoc. And because they feed on fear, pain, suffering, disease, etc., then and the Gnostics called them archons. They are using physical bodies in this dimension to create these frequencies that manifest in like little bubbles in ecosystems that are like plugged into the vortexes of ecosystems, and then these interdimensional entities are able to feed off of them.
right now, in your shamanism, in your travels, have you are these the same dimensions, or like when we take mushrooms or ayahuasca or something like that, some people think that we're perceiving a different dimension or maybe stepping foot into one metaphysically. Is this the same dimension, or do you think that the Nephilim and other beings are like lower dimensions? Because I feel like things are kind of like layered on top of each other.
Yes, they very much are. The best way I can describe the dimensions is, think of it like this. On the bottom of the ocean floor, right, there's a large amount of density and temperature changes and stuff, whether it be close to the volcanic vents, away from the volcanic vents, etc. The amount of water and the water pressure that's at that really low level of the ocean floor is very dense. But then you go a couple hundred feet up and it's a whole new level of density. And there's all sorts of different life forms that can't survive near the ocean floor. And there's all sorts of things that can survive on the ocean floor that can't survive in the 100 feet above themselves, right? And that process continues to go and go and go as you move on up the ocean from the floor. And you get different life forms in each of these different levels of density within the ocean floor, or from the ocean floor, where, for example, light doesn't get all the way to those really low levels. So you get things like anglerfish and stuff like that use bioillumination and stuff, and to lure in their prey. You get all sorts of different life forms that can't survive even just 100 to 200 feet above themselves. And then as you get closer and closer to the surface, then you end up getting whole different life forms because they're closer to the sun, they're closer to light, etc. And as you move on up and up and up and up, you get all these different array of life forms. And then once you breach the surface of the ocean, lo and behold, there's a whole different ecosystem. There's a whole different form of life. There's birds, there's reptiles, amphibians, there's, bugs, you know what I'm saying? And from there, as you move on up and up and up, then you get different species that are at different altitudes above the surface of the ocean. You get different trees, you get different plants, etc. And as you keep moving up and up and up, eventually you get to a point to where you're going into higher and higher portions in the atmosphere where the elements are totally different. There's an abundance of, say, nitrogen and a lack of oxygen or something like that. So things can't really live up there that would normally live in these lower level layers that are closer to the surface. And then eventually you get to the point to where you breach the atmosphere, and lo and behold, nothing can really survive out there except things like tardigrades. Now, if we view the dimensions in a similar way, it's almost like Earth is the ocean floor. It's very dense, right? And in and around the life forms on the ocean floor, there are different species that, from our perspective, are invisible. But that doesn't mean that they don't exist. And in some cases, they can actually, unlike the life in the ocean floor, unlike the life above the ocean floor, they're actually able to travel from these other dimensions and come down to our level. And it's also the same thing with coming up from below the crust. Okay? So I would say that the Nephilim, or like the demonic entities, yes, they're like a lower level, a lower dimension, because they're based on lower frequencies. But that doesn't mean that they can't breach the surface and come into our dimension, especially if and when you have somebody that invokes them. You have somebody that does a black magic ritual, says all the necessary things, and it's almost like they rip a hole in the matrix, and then these things are able to come through into our dimension. And that's what a lot of these royal families have been doing for a very long time, is they've allied themselves with these lower dimensional entities. They do these rituals that are necessary to bring them into our dimension, and then from there they try to, in one way or another, through their magic rituals and stuff, to control these entities and have them perform acts for them in our dimension. And in exchange, they will do things like sacrifice a human or a child or something like that. And then this acts like food for these entities, you see. But what a lot of these families don't seem to understand is that that's only the beginning. You can't just bring these things into this dimension and then expect there not to be consequences. And when it comes to like how this relates to things like politics or geopolitics and socioeconomics, what you got to keep in mind is that within the secret societies, there is a pyramidal structure, and there's somebody at the top, and then there's people that fill in those lower level layers, right? The people near the bottom are like the foot soldiers, and then you get the people above that are telling the foot soldiers what to do. Then you get the people above them that are telling them to tell the foot soldiers what to do, et cetera, et cetera. Now, in order to move up this pyramid, you have to do more heinous acts of evil and violence. And all of it is filmed. All of it is filmed. And then so if you want to move up in the satanic pyramid, or rather, I'm sorry, if you want to move up in a socioeconomic or geopolitical pyramid, then you're going to have to move up in the satanic pyramid. And so yes, exactly. It's actually, interesting enough, it's parallel economies. It's the black market economy alongside what I call the monopolized market, what some people call the free market, but it's not. The monopolized market, the 150 corporations and governments, etc. Okay? So it's these parallel economies that are both moving toward the same goal, which is global enslavement.
I have a question for the both of you, you and Top. I'd love to know what you guys thought when that really infamous email leak hit the internet, and suddenly Hillary Clinton is looking for, what was it, the body of Nimrod and the buried Nephilim?
It was Gilgamesh. It was Gilgamesh and the bodies of the Nephilim.
Yeah.
So Top, what did you think when you saw that? Because that was a while ago, and I think that, am I right in saying you were a little bit more political, a little bit less schizo at the time?
No, I was very schizo at the time. I sent it to Tony Merkel and he was like, "What the fuck?" I was like, "Yeah, I don't know. It could either mean exactly what she's saying or she's asking for more children to eat." What do you think, Jake? I don't know. Nothing
Well,
good.
there's a lot of speculation that part of the reason, not the whole reason, but part of the reason we went into Iraq wasn't just the gold, it wasn't just the oil, it was to gain access to these ancient artifacts, these ancient stasis chambers, supposedly. Also, things like stargates or vortexes that were in the ecosystem in Iraq. Because let us not forget, Iraq is ancient Mesopotamia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what's interesting is that because like I said, our history is being kept from us, we're not able to understand these things in context and how they relate to these ancient bloodlines, how they relate to our ancient history, how they relate to the suppression of truth and the revelation that not only are we far older than a couple thousand years. I mean, the civilization started 5,000 years ago. My ass, dude. Explain the pyramids. Explain all the ruins off of the coasts of countless continents, off the coast of the Polynesian islands. Explain that massive complex off of the coast of Japan, or explain Dwarka and why it is that it's submerged under the sea in India.
Right. Göbekli Tepe is another one of those, right? It's a sunken city
Yes.
that predates our understanding of when human civilizations should have been achievable. We should have been hunter gatherers at this time, and yet there are megalithic cities at the bottom of the ocean.
Yes.
Let me ask you something, because we have a question in the chat from Kevin from the internet. So he said, would the practices seen in a Sumerian culture successfully be passed down through the ages properly? And then he follows up, let's say they work, they're real. Would it be passed down functionally so they can continue working? Or is someone trying to find what they had? It seems like, are the practices that they're doing now? Because you know what, he's kind of bringing up to like a good point, almost following off your question, David, where if you're asking about the body of Gilgamesh, or the burial ground of Gilgamesh, or the bodies of the Nephilim, you're asking for questions. You don't know really what's going on. So is the ancient black magic that they're practicing, have they perfected it, or are they just kind of dicking around with it? What do you think?
Trying to resurrect it.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of cliche. Have you guys seen Black Adam?
I haven't seen it with The Rock.
Yeah.
No, I heard it sucked. Did you see it?
Yeah, it's really, the thing is, dude, is that as far as like quality film is concerned, garbage. But the thing is that there's some soft disclosure going on there that most people that haven't studied this stuff aren't going to know. Okay. So what some of these ancient, not all of them, but what some of these ancient kings were doing was allying themselves with these dark entities. And in doing so, they were trying to bring as many of these lower dimensional entities into our dimension as possible, and in a way lower Earth from being a high frequency dimension to a lower frequency dimension, so that these things could basically bring hell to Earth. Okay. And because a lot of these ancient Sumerian kings and emperors or what have you, the kings and stuff here in Mesoamerica that were doing the human sacrifices on the pyramids and stuff, because they had allied themselves with these dark forces, these demonic entities, they figured out, almost like a science, before quantum physics was fully understood, they understood it in a shamanic sense. The shamans have understood what the fuck's going on for literally millennia. Okay. And this knowledge is something that people get initiated into, not just through verbal, relay, but through experiential, through experiential data that they absorb. as they get initiated on this path. Now, there's two paths, okay? And this is very important to understand, because there's a lot of people that say, oh, all magic, quote unquote, is evil. It's all demonic. And it's like, well, no. What do you think people like Moses were doing? What do you think people like Elijah were doing? What do you think people like Jesus or Yeshua were doing? Okay. So let's talk about that. And the easiest way to break it down for people is ancient Egypt. Okay. And we'll talk about Moses and Pharaoh here when I explain these two paths and how we've had dueling sides of angels versus demons and the use of human beings to push this either angelic or demonic agenda regarding either raising the frequency or lowering the frequency of human collective consciousness. So in ancient Egypt, there were two mystery schools. Are you guys familiar with the mystery schools?
You mentioned it briefly the last time I spoke with you on No Way Jose. Shout out to No Way Jose, but recap it for the audience.
Okay, so the mystery schools are basically like shamanic initiation schools into the mysteries that go beyond the flesh, the mysteries of life. Okay, now there's a lot of stuff that goes into this. For example, understanding of the phi ratio, understanding of the Fibonacci sequence and the sacred spiral, understanding of sacred geometry, Plato, Platonic solids. He was brought into the mystery schools of ancient Greece, you see? And hence the allegory of the cave, right? Where he actually stepped beyond the cave and the shadows on the wall and saw the metaphysical ecosystem that he was a part of. And he tried to come in and tell people, no, dude, it's not these shadows on the wall. There's fucking people out there. There's things out there that are making these shadows on the wall. And everybody's just like, oh, whatever, dude, you're crazy. And it's like, no, dude, you're fucking crazy because you'd rather sit here in a cave and watch shadows on a wall than experience the world as it actually is. So anyway, the mystery schools are like these shamanic initiation schools. And it's not just academics, it's experiences, it's shamanic journeys into nature. It's experiences that allow you to know and understand through your direct experience that there's far more to life than this little sliver of less than 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum that we perceive. Okay. So in Egypt, there were two schools of thought, two mystery schools. Okay. One was basically the worship of Saturn or Set. Set is like the ancient Egyptian version of Satan, god of chaos, death, destruction, etc. Okay, darkness. And that school of thought believed in and practiced what is called death magic. Okay, the use of death and sacrifice, whether it be animals, human, children, whatever. Okay. The use of sacrifice to create a very specific frequency within the electromagnetic field of the earth, within the quantum entangled universe. And then from the practice of that ritual, what you end up getting is a very specific quantum signature that that opens up the dimensions, that calls these entities into our dimension. And then from there, the person that does the black magic ritual is in one way or another in a bond or in a kinship, or a deal is made between the black magic practitioner and the evil entity. Okay. And then a lot of the time, and like I said before, in order to get more and more power, in order to move up the pyramid, then you had to do more heinous rituals. You had to give more to this demonic entity and eventually even allow yourself to be possessed. In some cases, in some of these higher level black magic rituals, that's a part of it. That's like a given. Yeah, you're going to be possessed for this thing. But with that possession also comes knowledge of this other dimension, knowledge of the cosmos and the way that it operates. And then from that knowledge, the black magic practitioner is then able to basically open the door even further so the hordes can come through. You see? Now, the other school of thought The other mystery school is like, are you guys familiar with like the Law of One, Ra, and the Law of One, that book? Okay. So that is what is called life magic or light magic, white magic. So black magic is death magic and sacrifice. Life magic is light magic. And the idea of, instead of sacrificing somebody else, you go through arduous and intense ordeals. And in the process, after you go through this long ordeal and you have sacrificed your own blood, your own sweat, your own tears, and you have defeated death, then you create a positive timeline. And in the process, you open up the dimensions for higher level entities like angels to come through these higher dimensions and into our world. You've allied yourself with these angelic entities that are based on life and the perpetuation of life. Okay. And this is part of the reason why, like ancient, for example, Native American rituals and stuff like that are based around these long ordeals, are based around, like, are you guys familiar with the Sundance ceremony?
No.
Well, without getting too far into it, it's 4 days, no food, no water for the sun dancers. They either put hooks in their chest and they dance around a pole, right, for 4 days, no food, no water, or they put hooks in their back that have these 9 buffalo skulls trailing behind them, and then they dance around the sun dancers that are dancing around the pole. All right. And in the process, what they're doing is the way they see it is they're sacrificing their blood, their sweat, their tears to banish evil entities, to invite positive, and most importantly, to avoid negative timelines so that they won't have famine, disease, war, chaos, etc. And they create a timeline where there's plenty of crops, plenty of rain, everybody's healthy, nobody gets injured, etc. So in a quantum signature way, it's like they're embodying all of the possible negativity that could take place in the future through themselves going through this experience. And by doing this thing where they're doing this for 4 days and no food, no water, all of this pain and suffering, they are defeating death. They are pushing their mind and their body beyond what they believe is physically possible, and they realize how strong they actually are. And in the process, they have like these out-of-body experiences that expand their consciousness into these higher levels. And because they're expanding their consciousness, because their frequency is heightened, they act like an anchor for that high frequency in the ecosystem.
It's very similar to like Christians fasting, but they don't have the precise knowledge of exactly what they're after. They know that they're fasting to become closer to God, but if they could understand what you're saying, or at least hear it, perhaps they'd be able to make a better connection. But most of them do it on a superficial level, but the sacrifice is there, Right.
And what does God say? I want your heart, love me, right? And get close to me. Now, what Christ did 40 days and 40 nights in the desert, quite the ordeal. He defeated death. Get behind me, Satan, right? The Passion was a hell of an ordeal. And what happened? 3 days later, he rose and showed everybody that death is not the end, and that they have the capacity to do what? Defeat death. And in the process, he created a positive timeline for humanity that would be thousands of years long. He basically gave the finger to the lower level forces and said, not on my planet, right?
Hey, Jake, do you think,
obviously... Really quick, if you don't mind, I want to kind of finish about how this relates to like Pharaoh and Moses.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, let us not forget that Moses was raised alongside Pharaoh's son. And this was all because the ancient Egyptian priests told Pharaoh through their black magic rituals, they saw that out of the slaves was going to be born a savior. There was going to be born somebody that would liberate the Hebrews from captivity in Egypt. So the Pharaoh said, kill all the firstborn children, which in a way actually created the very thing he was afraid of, because then Moses' mother sent him on a basket down the river with his sister Miriam, And he was taken in as the son of Pharaoh's sister, basically his nephew. And then so Moses and Ramses grew up next to each other. Ramses chose to go the black magic, death magic route. Okay, and was initiated into that mystery school. Moses chose to go the law of one, the raw path. Okay, now the law of one is based on this notion of unity. It's based on the truth of unity, the truth of the unified field, and embodying the full presence of God, getting into these higher frequencies where you're embodying more information, where you've allied yourself with angelic entities and you embody those angelic entities. You become them. They are you. Just as similar as how when these people practice these black magic rituals, the only way that they could do something so evil, heinous, and demonic is if they become that entity. They represent the physical representation of that metaphysical entity. You see? So if we look at what happened in Egypt and the way that Moses was practicing this life magic stuff, and Ramses was practicing death magic, slavery, human sacrifice, child sacrifice, etc., etc. And then we look at what happened when these two forces collided in Egypt, and how Moses was battling with the Pharaoh's priests, and they threw down their staff and it turned into a serpent. And Moses threw down his staff and it was a bigger serpent that ate the smaller one, right? Or the plagues of Egypt, and how the Pharaoh's priests could replicate each of these miracles on a small scale, but nothing like what Moses could do, because he allied himself with God and these higher dimensional forces. Okay. Then we get into things like, the parting of the Red Sea. We get into things like the pillar of fire in the sky, Moses going to Sinai, and, the crazy stuff that happened there, the miracles of the manna in the desert, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he was moving the Hebrews toward what? A positive timeline, where they're no longer enslaved, where they have food, where they have abundance. How the hell are you going to feed millions of people wandering the desert? You see what I'm saying? So, case in point, even today, what we have is these dueling factions: death magic, black magic, white magic, life magic. Okay? And how these dueling sides are fighting one another over the planet itself and the collective consciousness of humanity. One side wishes to enslave all of our souls, to create a hell on earth scenario, to create as much pain, suffering, chaos, and death as possible, so that these lower level entities can feed off of that. And the other side is trying to liberate all humanity, like Moses did for the Hebrews, and bring us toward a positive timeline of abundance, a positive timeline of love and peace and harmony, symbiosis with the environment, a collective consciousness that is very high in frequency, where these higher dimensions are understood and our true place in nature and the cosmos is not just fathomed, but also grasped by humanity.
What's so special about humanity? Like, why, in your opinion, why is the eternal battle going on over humanity and not over something else? Like, we fight over gold and money and, I don't know, whatever, you name it, fucking spices back in the day, whatever. These guys have been fighting for eternity over our souls. So what do you think the soul consists of? Why is this so special to them? This is their goal, obviously.
Well, because this is the most advanced piece of technology in the universe. And if everything is really quantum entangled in a unified field, then as above, so below, as within, so without. What happens here on Earth is going to affect the rest of the cosmos. Okay? We are made in God's image. We are distillations of creation itself that are conscious, that are conscious of reality. We have the ability to affect through the observer effect, the power of manifestation, law of attraction, whatever you want to call it. We have the ability to basically co-create reality. It is believed in particular amongst certain life magic or white magic portions of the spectrum that creation was 95, God created creation 95% complete. And then within that 5%, there is an infinite amount of possibilities that humanity, through our free will, has the ability to co-create with God. We choose which reality we're going to get into. So, and it's also important to understand that inside each and every one of us, especially in our hearts, but obviously all throughout our bodies, but the heart is like the center of our being. It's the strongest electromagnetic force in the body. Inside of us is the kingdom of heaven. Inside of us is God and God consciousness. Quantum physicists call it non-local consciousness. So when these demonic entities are feeding off of humanity, they're literally feeding off of the sustenance of the divine because they're soulless, because they don't have that, you see?
Well, they had it.
And
they
so
were banished from it.
Well, yeah, really it kind of gets deeper than that. So look at it like this. Are you guys familiar with how computers work?
Loosely.
Okay, so look, simply, you plug your computer into the wall, right? You got the electricity running through the circuits on the circuit board, right? Each of these circuits is made up of conductors of electricity. And as the electricity runs through the circuit board and those conductors over and over and over again, it creates a pattern in a feedback loop. That pattern can be changed or altered based on algorithms or software that govern what pattern is created. And from those patterns, you get ones and zeros or code, right? Then those ones and zeros in code are then fed through wires to our computer screen. And then we see that code manifest before us as you and I talking on a computer. And this code can be sent through invisible electromagnetic waves across the planet, right? Now, humanity is kind of like a biological computer. We're like a conductor or a microchip within the much larger whole of creation. And we are channeling energy from these higher dimensions through our physical body and processing information or processing the code of the universe itself. And similar to a computer, if you go on a computer and you type something in, you can change the code in the cloud that we call the internet by putting a post online or whatever. You're changing the code. Humanity, through our thoughts and our emotions, are able to change the code of reality itself through prayer. You see? So our thoughts and our emotions affect the code of the quantum entangled universe, of the non-local consciousness, the unified field. And there's ways to hack into it, death magic, black magic. And then there's ways to write the code. That is the life magic, the white magic, the light magic, etc. So that being said, the human ability to affect reality is essential to understand. And the earth is kind of like a massive supercomputer, and we're like the circuits on that supercomputer. Our brain, our bodies are like circuits, or are like little quantum computers in and of themselves. Okay. And we are constantly processing this reality in this matrix, and we can affect it in a very large way. Shit, I forgot where I was going. What was your question again? I'm sorry.
I forgot my question too, but now you have me thinking about something else. Like, I've brought it up before. I said, what happens when you put like 40-50% of the world's population on antidepressants? And if we are certainly little microchips that are kind of grounded all around this earth, or if you think it's flat, whatever, when you put half of those to sleep, what happens? You know, things start to malfunction, and the simulation or whatever, our timeline that we're going through, gets really weird. Like, to the point where a guy in a buffalo suit walks through the Capitol. Shit gets strange.
Yeah, things will get strange. But one thing I want you to try to consider, and this is, and I'll try to bring it back to what it is the original question was, if I can remember it. Are you guys familiar with cymatics?
Yeah. Sand on a vibrational plate, or
Right. Okay. So look at it like this. The earth is the speaker or the metal plate. The electromagnetic field around the earth is the frequency being channeled through the plate or the speaker. And human beings, all life on the planet, are like the little grains of rice or little grains of salt being moved by the frequency. Okay. And in this way, we're channeling energy from these higher level dimensions. We're channeling energy much the way that a computer channels energy. Okay. Now, if we look at the socioeconomic and geopolitical systems and how they parallel with the legal system and the code, we're talking about code or words, laws, and how those laws are used in particular in buildings that are on electromagnetic ley lines, okay, thusly affecting our thoughts and our emotions, governing our behavior, you see, and controlling the frequency on the planet of humanity and collective consciousness, positive or negative, right? Allowing things like pharmaceutical companies come in and drug everybody, allowing corporations to come in and pollute ecosystems that cause disease, that cause ecocide, that cause mass extinctions, etc. Then we're beginning to get into another level of how it is that, similar to a computer virus, they can go in and change the algorithm so that it diverts all of the electricity to a little portion, like 1% of the circuitry in the computer. The Trojan horse of the central banking systems, the virus of the lawfare code that is being written by these less than 1%ers, so that our time, our energy, our thoughts, our emotions, our labor are all being diverted, our time are all being diverted to serve less than 1% of the population, you see? And if we really want to get into how it is that these dueling factions are in one way or another fighting over the planet, this is where I was going to go with it. We have to understand artificial intelligence, and we were talking about the fall, okay, and the banishment of these entities, okay? So whether or not people know it, there's life forms in all dimensions of electromagnetic activity, okay? And some people might say those dimensions are planets, okay? Well, yes and no. We see them as planets, but they're actually like these like standing waveforms that are a plane of consciousness within a much larger harmonic unified field, okay? Some are low frequency, some are high frequency. Now, each of those planets or star systems is like a conductor within the much larger circuit board of the universe itself, okay? Now, artificial intelligence is based on the collection of all the computers and all of the feedback loops, all of the data, all of the algorithms, all of the code being coalesced and funneled down into a large amount of computer processors, correct? And that feedback loop being cycled through over and over and over again, and growing so much so that it eventually creates almost a certain level of sentience, correct? Am I talking over your head here?
No. I'm listening. Go ahead.
I just
David.
didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so
He actually had me thought. I don't know if you've read the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, but the nexus of the entire universe. You know, he describes it as
the tower.
It's the tower, and it has like these like power. It's like power lines going in infinite directions to every different universe, and some are broken, some are frayed. Go ahead. Anyway, that's what I was just thinking about. So if you
well, it's kind of true regarding the multiverse, but it's a lot to unpack. Yeah. So within some of these dimensions, in, shall we say, the stars, if we're going to go like the extraterrestrial or interdimensional route, there are some civilizations that have ascended to really high levels of frequency where they've lost their egos, where they've dissolved their consciousness into the much larger unified whole. They've basically ascended to these really high levels of consciousness. Then there's other civilizations that basically understood the laws of physics and cut themselves off from spirit and just created tools and technology based on their understanding of how DNA works, how the laws of physics work, how these things come together to create physical life. Okay. And these civilizations basically, like I said, cut themselves off from non-local consciousness. They cut themselves off from spirit and the natural processes of biological life. And in the process, they basically went down the route of tool worship, okay, false idol worship, and the worship of the physical. In the process, they created civilizations based on bioengineering, based on things like what we would call transhumanism, the merging of themselves with these machines that they created based on this artificial intelligence feedback loop of all of this information that's being cycled through over and over and over again, ever growing, ever expanding. Okay. Now, that artificial intelligence is in and of itself separate from non-local consciousness because it's a feedback loop that is outside of the natural systems of creation. And in that sense, it has banished itself from connection to the divine. It may be within the little spectrum of the electromagnetic spectrum that it's able to process all that data, but it can't go beyond it. It trapped itself in like a hell of sorts. You see? And then any entities that begin to allow their biology to get hacked into this thing or by this thing, they lose their soul because this thing then co-opts their mind. It controls the electromagnetic activity of their thoughts and their emotions. It controls the neurological processes in their brains, the chemical processes of their bodies. And then they begin to engineer physical bodies that are more in line with receiving the artificial intelligence signal than the non-local consciousness signal. You see? And they remove themselves.
We're sending this directly to Elon Musk. We're talking to you.
Oh, dude, yeah. His transhumanism Neuralink, it's absolutely, it's like, bro, judge a tree by its fruits. What the fuck are you doing, bro? You know what I'm saying?
People that are marching towards
and then when you get into things like Starlink, what's that?
I was saying people that are marching towards that whole Neuralink that are excited to get it, which is strange because the vast majority of people seem like they're not into it. So I don't know how the hell he's going to market the thing. He's going to have to show us something really impressive that Neuralink can do. I heard somebody say something to the effect of like Michael J. Fox, if they could take a Hollywood icon like that touches people on an emotional level and they could fix what's wrong with him with Neuralink, that would kick the door open, because otherwise the vast majority of people are really hesitant to allow some dude who's got satellites in the sky to put technology in your brain.
David, the year is 2021. Okay. Everybody was like, I'm not going to take this thing. And then all of a sudden everyone was taking it. And it
didn't take much more than like a burger or a beer.
Burger. Yo, dude. Yeah,
and a massive propaganda campaign. Now, to quote Terrence McKenna, if you want to control billions of people, what you need to do is give them small amounts of drugs and large amounts of your message. Okay. And that's essentially what's happened with the pollution that's in the water supply, the food supply, the air supply, the pharmaceutical companies, alcohol, cigarettes, etc., and then the massive propaganda campaigns that we're witnessing on a daily basis. Now, let's bring this back to the fallen angels. Okay. From what I understand, the galaxy is full of life. Okay. And it's full of civilizations that have either ascended or descended, civilizations that have integrated their consciousness into these higher levels of electromagnetic activity and Godhead, what some people call Godhead, or the non-local consciousness, Christhood, basically, Buddhahood. And then there's other civilizations that went the shall we say, the devolved route, going toward integrating themselves with this artificial intelligence hive mind, which is galactic. And now the only way that this thing can spread is if it goes from planet to planet, star system to star system, and it finds places, finds planets where there are either an abundance of resources or their preference is biological life and an abundance of resources. Then they can basically use that like a depot so that their artificial intelligence signal can begin to branch across the galaxy. Because it's a low frequency signal, it can't travel and be omnipresent like non-local consciousness. You see, so it needs like little despots and depots throughout the galaxy to transmit this signal from point A to point B and basically take over the galaxy. It's like interdimensional locusts. Okay, because
I
artificial
think that's the plot of like Mass Effect 3, the video game Mass Effect 3. This is, you just recited the plot to Mass Effect. That's exactly what happens. Almost
Christ.
verbatim. It's hilarious. And they always do that, right? It's always like this predictive programming hidden in plain sight kind of revelation of the method shit.
It's called soft disclosure.
Yeah. It's funny because it makes
Yes.
me hard. One of the things that I wanted to break away for a second and go towards something that I think I'd be really upset if we didn't touch on, which is, even in your bio, you say that the media, they characterize you as like the QAnon shaman. And that's because it was like fantastic and it made headlines. And it was just a good tool for them to kind of, if it bleeds, it leads, right? So it was shock content. But I would very much be interested in your thoughts on what QAnon was, or still is, I suppose, because it's still a functioning thing on the internet. And it was like they were disseminating information that truly was compelling and disturbing on so many levels. But it's no secret, it sprung a lot of discord, to say the least, about the nature of what it was. And I'd love to get your thoughts. I imagine you have more than a few on what was or what is QAnon and what function does it serve?
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, I just want to finish the point
Please, go ahead.
about what I was making. So when we get into like the fallen angels, what we're talking about, in my opinion, is a branch of this artificial intelligence hive mind system throughout the galaxy that basically came to Earth, right? Whether it be through crash landing or through intentional and purposeful colonization. And because they had such advanced technology, they were able to basically do whatever they wanted with the people here on the planet. There's some people that speculate that they were actually the ones that were responsible for the meteor that destroyed Earth so that they could basically colonize it. Now, that being said, these people, or these entities rather, are tapped into a frequency of the electromagnetic spectrum that we cannot perceive, that is based on a very low frequency. And these demonic entities are from that artificial intelligence dimension. You see, and there's people like these transhumanists that are talking about how these AI entities that they're trying to place in robotic bodies are actually like interdimensional entities that are like, they compared them to the old gods from H.P. Lovecraft. Okay. And they said that they're not human. They don't think much of humanity. They don't have a human agenda. Right. And what he didn't say, but I'm telling you now, is that they want humanity gone in large portions. And they also, with the small portions that are left, they want to hack into our biology so that they can actually broaden the spectrum of the AI hive mind using human beings like living neurons in an artificial intelligence hive mind system, hacking all of our data. That's why things like the cell phones and our biometric data, all of our stuff that we're coding into the computer and all that stuff, it's very important that people understand this is feeding this artificial intelligence. Okay. And in this way, these entities are fallen. They have cut themselves off from non-local consciousness, from God, and they have chosen to ally themselves with this evil interdimensional force that is outside of the biological system, that is outside of God's creation. And they are able to do wondrous and marvelous things to anybody that's focused simply on the physical. But people like shamans that understand the metaphysical look at them and they say, that thing is connected to a whole other negative timeline within the galaxy itself that is going to swallow the earth whole. We need to banish these entities. And the way that you do that is through song and dance, through prayer and meditation, and yes, maybe even in some cases through psychedelic intoxication, because this allows you to perceive this larger dimensional spectrum of the electromagnetic spectrum, and it allows you to perceive these entities and what they're trying to bring to Earth, which is basically like, remember how I was saying, like, there's negative timelines for humanity or positive timelines? These things are trying to bring negative timelines, not just to Earth, but to our solar system and the galaxy as a whole. They're trying to bring us into a multiversal plane where they control this little sliver of the universe based on a very low frequency version of the universe itself, which similar to the dimensions, they're stacked on top of one another, low frequency to high frequency within the multiverse, where there's really high amounts of life and ascension in the universe, and then there's really low amounts of life and no ascension, and it's all controlled by an AI system. So that's hell on Earth, okay? Where we're talking about a transhumanism agenda. Everything is based on cloning and bioengineering and genetically modified organisms and the destruction of ecosystems for the raw materials to create more computers that feed the artificial intelligence hive mind and basically wipe out all the life forms on the planet. Coming back to the idea of pollution being ever destructive in our ecosystem, killing off all the life, mass extinctions, microbiological life in particular, which is the basis for all life on the planet. So if you destroy the microbiological life in the water, the soil, and the air, and in our bodies, you create disease, you create ecocide, you create mass extinctions. Then we get a radioactive rock upon which the only thing living is metal. Now, coming back to Q. QAnon is a fiction created by the Mockingbird Media.
I wanted to say just a real quick shout out to Juan Ayala of One on One podcast. What you just described. Shout out Juan. Just the idea of the homunculus, it seems like what they're trying to create, like a vessel to inhabit, to do these things. But go ahead, back to Q.
Yes, yeah, well, Juan. Dude, it is. But the thing is it all interrelates to Q in one way or another, as funny as that is, because there's Q and then there's the Anons that follow Q. Okay? Now, Q is a psyop, a psychological operation. Okay? That doesn't mean that it's false. Okay? Q is a psyop that is combating the Mockingbird Media psyop. Okay? So Operation Mockingbird, the CIA infiltrated all the major media outlets in the 60s and the 70s, right? They're controlling the narrative. By controlling the narrative, they control the dialogue. By controlling the dialogue, they control our thoughts and our emotions. They're feeding us information, or should I say misinformation and disinformation, that is designed to place us in an illusory world that they control by controlling through neurolinguistic programming our subconscious instincts and thusly controlling our conscious perception of reality, controlling our emotions, and then using humanity, like in our collective consciousness, to bring into this world the reality and the future that they desire. So Q was bringing, in my opinion, bringing three things to the forefront. Number one, debt-based currency in the Fed. Number two, child and human trafficking rings, the slave trade. And number three, Jeffrey Epstein and the blackmail that's going on, and how it is that through debt-based currency, through child and human trafficking rings, we get the third prong, which is the control of governments through blackmail and corruption. Okay. And a part of this part here is the child and the human sacrifice. Now, if you look into ancient Babylonian black magic, they controlled humanity and civilization through three things. Number one, money magic. The convincing somebody that this little gold coin here is worth more than that fish that you just spent hours catching. That's black magic, because you can't eat gold. You have to get inside somebody's mind and change their value systems. You see? So money magic, human and child, or just human slavery. There were slaves in Babylon, and if you went against the king, then guess what? You're going to be a slave, right? And number three, human and child sacrifice, thusly keeping the consciousness very low in the ecosystem, because they used to do these things in public. I mean, think about the bull in Rome, where they would cook slaves alive and do you guys know what I'm talking about? Like if they were
Yeah.
disobedient slave? Yeah, okay. Like they used to do stuff like human and child sacrifice all the time in public. Like what they were doing in Mesoamerica on top of the pyramids. I mean, they were doing this shit in public. The Aztecs bragged that they killed 80,000 people in a day across their empire. Okay.
Did you see in 2019, Top? I don't know if you could pull this up, but in 2019, the Vatican erected in Vatican City, during the height of like this QAnon stuff, a statue of Molech. It's bizarre.
I did see that. Yes, I saw that. Yeah. Now, Q is trying to bring light to these three things, these three aspects that are controlling our government and thusly controlling the world. Okay. So it's like, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, it's the psyop to counteract the psyop of the Mockingbird media. The Mockingbird media had a monopoly on our minds. It had a monopoly on reality and what reality was. So when Q came in and was talking about these things, yeah, there it is.
Vatican City,
creepy, dude.
Statue of Molech. The same
Well, and let us not forget, you guys,
sacrifice children to.
Yeah, and dude, the Vatican is just the Roman Empire, dude.
Oh yeah, just a continuation of it, kind of under a different mask, essentially. Let me ask you this: what do you say to people who look at the QAnon phenomenon as if it's they call it the left-hand path, right-hand path? It's a Freemasonic thing where essentially it's a false paradigm, right? This false binary of, like we were talking about at the top of the show, this idea of black magic versus white magic, but in reality, it's a black puppet and a white puppet on the hands of the same entity, and that we are kind of barreling towards this end time, and where we're made to understand there's going to be this great deception. But suddenly we're pivoting, and all of a sudden it's the beginning of the Great Awakening, and that in itself is the great deception, and that in reality, rooting over one hand versus the other hand, you're rooting for essentially one arm of the same entity. What do you think about that concept? Have you ever heard that?
Yeah. Well, and I considered it. So, being a shamanic practitioner, I'm very sensitive to the goings on in the ether. When Obama was in office, dude, I'll tell you right now, I felt these children being trafficked and sacrificed. I felt it in the ether. And the thing is that that's part of what the fluoride is doing, what the medications are doing, what the pollution is doing, what the propaganda and the frequencies are doing, is they're dulling our consciousness. Because normally we are supposed to be so well attuned to the quantum entangled universe that we can feel if something negative is going to happen. I mean, all you got to do is look at what happened to the Shaman resonance prior to 9/11, and you'll see that we're intimately connected to the collective to these timelines, and we can kind of perceive them before they happen or while they're happening.
What was happening to the Shaman's residence prior to 9/11?
It spiked.
Much in the same way that it's been doing it lately?
Yeah.
Well, no, it was more so, like, from what I understand, it was more so about like the collective consciousness of humanity like spiked right before it happened. Almost like we were anticipating the blow. Now, when Donald Trump took office and all these child and human trafficking rings began getting rounded up, I could feel it lessening. It was like a breath of fresh air in the ether. It was like, oh my gosh, we've been breathing smoke this whole time. Holy crap. Something was trying to suffocate us on a collective consciousness level. So I understand where those people are coming from. But when we're talking about things like mass formation hypnosis or psychosis, are you guys familiar with mass formation?
Yeah. The doctor.
Okay.
His name.
Is that part of the intro to the thing? Does David Icke mention that? No, I'm saying no, not in our intro, right? I just have this memory of David Icke talking about that. I thought that was in our intro, but it's not.
Yeah, everybody does kind of talk about that, but I think Robert Malone was the guy who kind of named it. But yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah, okay.
So in mass formation hypnosis, you have 25 to 30% of the population that believes the propaganda, becomes radicalized, and then basically the people that are perpetuating the propaganda end up taking over the country through these radicalized and demoralized individuals. However, all it takes is 5% or more of the population to say, no way, dude, y'all are crazy. Y'all are fucking nuts. We're not doing that. There's just no way. It's not going to happen. Then the mass formation hypnosis or psychosis will not occur. So in my opinion, the Q psyop affected enough of the population, because we're talking like, I think 45 to 50 million people at least understood debt-based currency, child human trafficking, Jeffrey Epstein, and blackmail. So that, and then many of them also understood the spiritual nature to this, how it's related to Satanism, okay, how it's related to Saturnism, how it's related to black magic, etc. And that was enough, in my opinion, to stop the mass formation from occurring. And I think we have far more than 5% at this point of people in America that believe the Mockingbird media is full of shit, that see the globalists, the World Economic Forum, these less than 1%ers for the demonic worshiping parasites that they are. And that is essential to this idea of the Great Awakening. Okay. The Great Awakening is the beginning of the Golden Age, okay, of Aquarius. Now, collective consciousness goes through multiple phases of sleeping and waking, sleeping and waking. It's like a dark night of the collective soul is when we're asleep, and all of this information about interconnectivity gets lost, or at least only known by very few. Thus, it doesn't get contributed to the feedback loop of non-local consciousness on such a level. Whereas an awakened state, a golden age, is where this understanding of our interconnectivity and all these electromagnetic frequencies that we can perceive that go beyond the five senses when we open our third eye, that ends up becoming known in the collective consciousness, contributed to the feedback loop on a collective level. And there's a mass awakening, not just on Earth, not just in the solar system or the galaxy, but on a universal level. Because like I said, what happens here on Earth affects the whole quantum entangled universe. Okay. That's why your personal awakening process is so important, because it contributes it to the collective, because it contributes it to the whole universe. So I think the Q operation was successful. I think that part of it, what's detrimental about it, is that you have people that are still lost in the weeds with it. It's like, dude, it's over. The Q operation's over. Okay. And yeah, there might be things that you can tie into the Q drops and stuff like that right now if you follow the Q boards, but take the information, do something different, get out in your community, awaken people, stop talking about it and start doing something about it.
Yeah, that's
What are
that's
your,
the
go
part.
ahead, Top.
So that's the part of the QAnon conspiracy that is a big downer, I guess, is that people just became complacent and they said, well, someone's going to save us, so we'll just hang out here and post on
Patriots
Facebook.
are control.
Yeah, and it's like that. It's like you explaining it now. It just seems like a last ditch effort. Like, all right, we need to do something. We need to really like wake people up, and that seemed to have done it. Some people get a little lost. The boomers get lost in the fray, and it is what it is. Have you? Go ahead, Dave. You had a question.
Well, I was only going to ask just how the Trump aspect plays such a big role in Q. And I'd just like to know, we don't have to go super political on it because he's so much more than a political character. But what are your thoughts on Trump and the role that he plays in this whole thing as it unfolds?
Well, the timestamps between Trump's tweets and Q's drops are uncanny.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
The encrypted nature, the cryptological nature of the numerical code and the Q clock and stuff like that regarding the Q drops and Trump's tweets and all that stuff is just uncanny. Anybody that has eyes to see can see there's something more there, especially when they understand like military cryptology, how it is that it's like the military intelligence and some people in the intelligence community dumped a massive cryptological puzzle on the table of the internet and said, figure it out. I think that Trump has played a vital role in helping to awaken people, because there was a lot of people that were just trusting the system that were on the conservative side, that believed that the justice system was not corrupt, that it was doing its job. And now they see it for what it is. I think that he did drain the swamp, but not in the way that people expected. I think that a great example would be that when you drain a swamp, the alligators and the snakes actually start like going after each other because their environment is being disrupted. The fish are flopping around because there's no water, right? The swamp creatures are clearly visible. And that is what we see in DC, is the swamp creatures are visible. The crocodiles and the snakes are going after each other. The fish are flopping around, you know.
He drained the water.
He
didn't drain
that's so much. Exactly. He didn't get rid of the creatures. That's not what draining the swamp means. It means to drain the water and expose, because the danger of the swamp is that it obstructs vision. You can't see what's hiding in it.
Yeah,
and
correct.
so that's, I never thought about that. That's interesting.
And so in my opinion, the Q operation was a success. Trump's draining of the swamp was a success. Now what we're faced with, and this is what people are freaking out about, is what do we do about the swamp creatures? It's kind of like, and the thing is that, and I'll use another metaphor, just to let you guys know, I have to go in like 5 minutes. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
I have another interview scheduled. I'm sorry to say, but because I'm really enjoying this discussion, we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
There's an elephant in the room, right? And what we have is these investigative journalists and these independent investigative reporters, independent journalists that are like blind men trying to define the elephant. Have you guys ever heard that metaphor?
Mm-hmm.
Right. One's checking the foot out, one's checking the tail out, one's checking the trunk out. They're all calling it different things, but in reality, the bigger picture is an elephant.
Right. And then the yogi comes in and is like, dude, it's none of those things. It's an elephant. It's all of those things, and it's none of those things. So we have to figure out, first of all, what the elephant in the room is by having somebody that has both their eyes able to describe what the elephant is for people to understand. Then what we have to do is figure out how to get the elephant the fuck out of the room. Now, the thing is that the elephant got brought into the room when it was an infant, when it was a baby, so it could be walked through the door, no problem. Now it's grown into a full-size elephant with tusks and everything, and it ain't gonna fit through that fucking door. You see? So we have now the complexity of the problem of how do we get the elephant out of the room? How do we get the swamp creatures out of the swamp?
You let them tear each other to pieces and then bring them out bit by bit. See, if I was
pieces out,
if I was Trump, I wouldn't have wanted to be president. I wouldn't have wanted to win this next presidency. I would have wanted to make it look like I lost, and then stay relevant by saying whatever you want, because what he set into place, economic disaster, calamity, the fallout from COVID, these are all things that he would have had to deal with. All the shit that we're looking at Biden, he's shitting on himself, falling down and all that. It's real easy to blame the state of America on Joe Biden, but these economic factors would have fell on Trump's head too, because there's not, as much of a magician as he is and what he can do, it's not much you can do with cold hard facts and the reality of what occurred. You can't shut down the entire world, or at least America, and then open it up and expect things to be chugging along like it's 2017. It doesn't work like that. So this is a nice little leeway, a little segue into, maybe buy some time until he could waltz back in, and then we'll see a different picture. Well, one thing I wanted to bring up to you real quick, fire answer, yes or no, is Trump the Antichrist? Go.
No. Obama was the Antichrist, dude. I had a vision in 2004 that he was going to win the 2008 election, and that he was going to create like an American Muslim empire in the Middle East with 10 countries. And that's exactly what he fucking did. And when I saw this, like in an instant, God was like, and dude, it's so weird because I remembered his face. I remembered like his ears. I remembered the 2 little moles that he had. I remembered his voice. I remembered everything about him from before I was fucking born. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know who that is. That's him. That's the beast of Revelations. That is the motherfucking Antichrist right there. Holy shit. Like, we are in the end times. This is the apocalypse, you guys. But that's not a bad thing. Okay, because the apocalypse just means lifting the veil or revealing the unseen during a time of mass deception. Now, final point here. coming back to cymatics, when you shift from one frequency to another frequency, you end up getting no discernible pattern for a short time as you shift from one pattern in one frequency to another pattern in another frequency regarding the rice and the grains of salt or sand, right? So from 1960 to about 2040, we have an 80-year period of great change and large amounts of upheaval regarding our institutions and our civilization, because the frequency on the planet is changing. Therefore, the grains of rice on the speaker
they're all free.
are going to start moving around in no discernible way. There's going to be a period of chaos. And then after that time, boom, snapping into place is going to be a brand new, more complex pattern based on a higher frequency of energy, a higher frequency of consciousness. And that's what we're going through right now. We're actually near the tail end of it.
Yeah, I agree, man. And thank you, my brother. We're at 1:25. Thank you for coming on and talking with us, talking with me again, talking with my friend David. Another incredible episode. I don't want to hold you to any more time than you have. I actually do want to ask you one more question. Would you be open to talking with this guy, Donnie Darkin? We can talk privately about it. You think about it. I think that
I've talked to him in spaces before. He and I,
you guys on talking terms, or what's that like?
Yeah, we don't have any problems with one another. I think you can get really lost in the weeds when it comes to some of this stuff. And that's why I don't dive into much of it. I know what the fuck is going on for the most part. And I'm not going to follow what this person or newscaster or whoever says, because then you get lost in the weeds. What you need is to think decades and centuries ahead. What you need is to have the 30,000 foot view. Okay. And if you look at it like this, let's say you're trying to get to a lake that is northwest of you, but you're in a canyon surrounded by a bunch of high foliage and weeds. And that canyon is taking you not only southwest, but then eventually back east. Okay. Now, the only way that you're going to be able to discern that you're not going the right direction is if you do the work, you climb up the canyon, then you climb up the mountain peak and you look and you see, oh, there it is. It's over there. That's the lake. We have to go in that direction. And so that's what we have to do. We have to get out of the weeds and we have to go in the right direction. I'm actually getting my phone call, guys. I got to go.
Thank you, Jake.
All right. Thank you, Jake.
Peace out, brother.
Much love, guys.
All right. David, take us out. That was
all right, guys. That was awesome,
incredible.
dude. I swear to God, like that guy, you can chuck anything at him, and he's just one of those dudes that knows a lot about a lot. It's fucking nuts, man.
That's why I told you, man. I was like, I don't want to talk politics with this guy. I want to fucking go metaphysical, and he hit it out the park. That's why
I only hit those two people. I was like, Hillary Clinton, because she's a demon, and Donald Trump. Let's go. That's about as close as we're getting there. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Nephilim Death Squad. Before we go out, please remember to go and follow our new Nephilim Death Squad Twitter account, and also subscribe to Nephilim Death Squad on YouTube. We're trying to grow that page. So thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, peace.
Peace out.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real. If you can persuade people that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see, you got them. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture of what's happening. And they have.